Hello again, this is James Nussbaumer, and now we head into Chapter 9 of The Master of Everything, a story of mankind in the world of illusion we call life. The title of Chapter 9 is Losing Ourselves in the World. Life's a bitch, then we die. These are the words I overheard in a debate between two 60-something inmates as I was sitting on a bench adjacent to these two men. We all three gazed out beyond the barbed wire, the razor-wired fence, into a wooded area miles into the country and farmland. It was after sunrise. Otherwise, I would most likely not have been able to find a seat anywhere in the yard due to the overcrowded conditions. I was hoping to catch a glimpse of wildlife and was not a part of their conversation, so I continued to daydream as my eyes panned for a vision of naturalness. Memorized by a flock of Canadian geese flying overhead, I couldn't help but respond inside my head to a question one of these gray-haired guys brought up. When is the world going to wake up? Their concerned conversation had been circling around the observation that we live in a fearful world, faced with crisis every day. One of them remarked about how the old ways of interacting with one another weren't working anymore. With the quacking geese fading into the horizon, I pondered man's survival, being threatened by ever-growing, seemingly insurmountable problems. Our species faces extinction, I was thinking, unless we're able to rise above the limitations of our condition through an overdue evolutionary leap. A significant portion of the world's population is recognizing that humanity is now faced with the decision to either evolve or die, and many are already striving towards this change. What is the condition we must save ourselves from, and what is the corresponding evolutionary leap? Some years ago, I was fortunate enough to view a 13th century work of art that hangs in a gallery in Florence, Italy, by an artist whose name was lost centuries ago. The artwork, a tapestry showing Adam and Eve's expulsion from the garden, got me thinking. Its meaning was clear. The couple are being driven from the Garden of Eden for their disobedience of God's commands. In the foreground of the scene are Adam and Eve. A wise old owl sits in a tree looking on, while a monkey with his tail in the air seems to be jabbering, "I told you so." Above them, in a gold-patterned robe with a hood wafting his head in the breeze, is the figure of God. One hand seems to be firmly pushing the rebellious pair from the garden paradise, while the other hand points to the winged angel with a flaming sword guarding the tree of knowledge. The Bible relates that the Lord clothed Adam and Eve in animal skins, which the tapestry depicts. Because they violated the law for residence in the spiritual realm, God sent them forth to till the ground from which they were supposedly formed. So the story goes. Through the ages, it has been insisted upon that God guaranteed long suffering for the first humans and their unborn descendants, and we have all along been taught to believe this. Many to this day have misunderstood the nature of humanity's long suffering by viewing it as pain and toil, rather than the mind of creation choosing to be separate from the thought of its creator, causing confusion about their own identity. The story goes on that Adam blamed Eve for giving him the forbidden fruit, which we could say is a new identity, which they both ate and which we could say chose to separate from the mind of God. And likewise, Eve blamed the serpent, who had a reputation for being crafty. Placing blame on someone or something is as old as the Garden of Eden. Thus, the separated world began to build outside and continues today. The wise old owl makes a point by raising a question that has burdened man ever since the separation. How could the two defend themselves unless they felt threatened and believed that their own defense could save them? Their guilt for making a separate identity became their reality, and they feared their new identity, which they had taken upon themselves. They didn't know what to expect. This layered fear upon fear, which caused chaos and panic. A Course in Miracles goes deeper into the meaning of the creation story to teach us that in the creation, God extended himself, forming our mind out of his, and giving us the same loving will to create as one with him. No child of God can lose this ability to be creative. We are perfect and creative with our mind as part of his, where there is no emptiness or lacking. But instead, we have learned to make projections, which are thoughts of our own choosing, which are based in the fear of or disbelief in separation, rather than using our creativity to extend ourselves. We project an image of our body and of other bodies. For example, we do, but a projection is not an extension. The inappropriate projection of images occurs when we believe that emptiness or lack exists inside of us, and that we can fill it with our own ideas instead of the truth. You might think of it in this way. A projection is sent forth and is separate from who you are within. But an extension is a part of us. And when we extend that, such as love, it still remains with us. It never leaves us. You may view the projected image of the Big Bang or the violation of the tree of knowledge as the symbol for the separation, which occurred millions of years ago, but in reality was only an instant ago. Regardless, the following beliefs reflect how the mind of humanity came to separate from God's and to form projections to make up for a perceived lack. We continue these steps today due to our fear of lacking, which maintains our illusion that we are a separate identity from that of our all-loving Creator. First, we believe that what God created can be changed by our own mind. Second, we believe that what is perfect can be rendered imperfect or lacking. Third, we believe that we can distort the creations of God, including ourselves. Fourth, we believe that we can create ourselves and that the direction of our creation is up to us. These related distortions represent a picture of what actually occurred in the separation, or we could call it, as A Course in Miracles tells us, the detour into fear. In the pre-separation, nothing was needed due to the oneness, the wholeness of all of creation. As portrayed in the tapestry, the monkey goes on to criticize Adam and Eve while following them out of the garden paradise. The monkey sarcastically scolds them for ever considering planning for the future or organizing the present to be any better when they already had everything they needed. The prosperity of the pre-separated mind was within and not located somewhere out there. Ever since, the journey continues as the world operates from a belief system that teaches we must protect ourselves from what surrounds us. We feel the world is threatening, that there is danger lurking, which has the power to call on us to retaliate. Consider the battle over nuclear power as proof enough of the furthering of our defense structures due to our thoughts, fears, and doubts that preclude our true essence. Well, what is our true essence, you may ask? We'll be discussing this at greater lengths later on throughout this book, but for now we want to start you off in small doses. So for now, let's try to understand that the first part of the mind to separate was formed as what is now called consciousness. Our true essence is the part of consciousness that is aware of this split and strives to learn how to find the way or the path back home. Our true essence doesn't care or worry about the repercussions of the split mind, such as the many legalities and penalties, along with various moral systems and leaders who try to teach us how to live, all of which merely serves to reinforce and increase our sense of threat. Our true essence is not fearful at all, and therefore doesn't need or seek defense. Our true essence doesn't seek safety because it perceives its existence beyond our body. This true essence of who you are is what A Course in Miracles calls your right mind or right-mindedness. In this state, you are perceiving yourself correctly about your true reality. Any thinking you may have that is based on this right perception, we can call right-minded thinking or simply right-mindedness. Right-minded perceptions can feed and strengthen right-minded thoughts and vice versa. But hold on a second. There's another section of the split mind that is quite the opposite, called wrong-mindedness. Wrong-minded thinking causes continued splitting and fragmentation. Wrong-mindedness includes avoiding the unknown and feeling guilty. It makes us feel fearful and frightened because we believe in a body that is failing us. Therefore, we believe in death. The wrong-minded attempts to recover what we believe to be lacking form the illusory thought system that we call ego. The ego was fabricated by the conscious mind, and that is where it abides. The ego's awareness of its own fabrication is why the ego fears God. The fear of God is nonsense because our all-loving Creator does not want to be feared, but thanks to the ego, humankind continues to suffer from this belief to this day. This will continue for millions more years to come until we reach atonement. Full atonement, or we can say, if you split the word up into three segments, at one-ment. Full atonement will mark the end of all time. We will be talking about this more a bit later. The Garden of Eden represents a state of mind in which there was no past or future, and where nothing was needed. Time did not exist, nor did space, because nothing was physical. Adam was dreaming when he listened to the lies of the snake. But keep in mind, the conversations between Adam and the serpent occurred during the pre-separation. The Bible says that Adam fell into a deep sleep, but nowhere is there any reference to his waking up. The world as a whole, the world of oneness as one, whole meaning when I say whole in this, I'm saying W-H-O-L-E. The world as a whole continues to dream and has not yet reawakened. The separation is a dream, a fantasy of making a better identity. Awakening is impossible while we dream up our own truths based on an idol we have called ego, which is nothing more than illusory thoughts. It's not real. In the pre-separation, or in the part of the mind that never separated at all, is the real world where idols do not exist and therefore are not real. Yes, it's all a dream, and only an instant will have gone by when we finally awaken. But we must awaken slowly as long as we dream of time. This slow, nurturing awakening is the process of atonement, the ultimate goal. This slow awakening can be compared to the experience of having a nightmare while sleeping in the dark, and a light is suddenly turned on. Initially, you may think the light is part of the dream, unless you naturally slowly awaken to find out the light is real and never was of the dream. I am able now to see how my fears of the unknown sent me in directions where I undertook certain measures to make my own truths. I disregarded what I considered to be incompatible with the beliefs and values I had chosen in order to achieve a reality my ego wanted. What I didn't accept is that everything happens, all events, past, present, and future, for the purpose and good of the oneness, or the whole one mind. The purpose is the real world, and the events are the scripts being played out in the dream. Yes, everything we do in form, in physical form, are just scripts that we're playing out as the dream goes on. What is oneness again, or what is the whole mind again? The one real mind of all of creation that never really split at all. It is the whole mind that does not dream. And this is what your right mind is able to perceive. The whole mind, which never thought of separation, does not recognize the split. Okay, pause for a second and take a deep breath right now. Go ahead, please. Now, please be patient as we move along. This will come to you in time as a revelation, which is personal and cannot be fully explained, but it can be known. Try to see that this is what time is being used for, and that the Holy Spirit uses time to get you to the path where your destination is the atonement. You will be introduced to the Holy Spirit or your personal guide in detail in a section just ahead in this book. So for now, try to keep your thinking in a neutral mode. Consciousness, or ego, does believe in oneness or whole, but only individual onenesses or individual wholes, like people, nations, or races. Believe me, the ego has as many wholes as it can possibly make out of the dreaming split mind. The ego cannot fathom what the whole mind is. What has been happening is that we continue to choose broken or split off pieces of the whole mind to construct our defenses, putting them together to our own liking to stand against other pieces of the whole without regard to all true relationships within the universe. This insane process is the very essence of the unknown, causing chaos and distrust and harming or killing others for their own safety. This is the destructive insanity of a split and fragmented mind that projects images of danger. For example, take the death penalty in the United States. Many in this country believe it deters people from committing murder. This thought pattern of the ego seems to be bigger than that of the murderers themselves. So who are the real killers? Careful studies of the deterrent effects of the death penalty were made by comparing homicide rates of two similar states with opposing laws. There was no supporting evidence of an effective deterrent. In fact, many people believe that the death penalty actually increased the homicide rate, permitting some people to feel they have a right to punish others in the same way that the state does by killing them. The studies also showed that more than 85% of all murders were committed in fits of rage induced by drugs and alcohol, although not one execution ever healed a drug or alcohol addiction. Nonetheless, we continue to spend endlessly on perpetuating the death penalty and little on rehabilitating addicts and alcoholics. I have spoken to survivors of death row. Some have been my friends in prison who were originally sentenced to death by electrocution. Before their execution date, the state of Ohio pulled the plug on Old Sparky, which is a nickname for the electric chair, reverting to the more humane lethal injection. With Old Sparky outdated, legally these lives were spared now that the state no longer had any electric device to do the job. You might think these prisoners would feel relieved, but this was not the case. They all have a similar attitude. They want to be executed. They want to project their guilt onto the state. If the death penalty doesn't work, why do voters insist on keeping it? For most, they seek the satisfaction of revenge. But an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth is not a sentiment that nice folks like to acknowledge, so they conjure up their own rationales. With this, we take the sides of our leaders who will rage against drugs and crime, just to mention a few. What we fight, though, we simply get more of. For instance, we continue to build prisons, In the United States, prison population has increased over 400% since 1980. We declared a war on drugs, and more illegal drugs are being abused today than ever before in history. Millions of abortions have been performed because we decided to make it lawful to kill unborn babies. This kind of logic enormously satisfies the ego and strengthens the separation between wholeness and fragmentation of our real selves. Wholeness is obscured by the cloud cover of a false identity. For centuries, humanity has been trying to awaken, only to see killings when opinions diverged from church doctrine and its versions of truth. In reality, these doctrines are all bundles of doubt, creating more ego. We have made ourselves heir to the laws that govern this world we think we so desperately need. If we continue to see ourselves as pieces of these splitting apart whole minds or egos, the laws of scarcity, fear, and death will rule us. But if we can see ourselves as the one thought of God and our real home resting in an awareness beyond this world, only then can we begin to live by the universal laws that created who we truly are, which is perfect love. We do have a choice. All of us, individually, in our right-mindedness, can resolve to live each day in a new way, being spontaneous and alive with trust, trusting in who and what we are. Or we can continue to say, life's a bitch, then we die. What if we stopped asking for things outside of us to change, but rather something within us to change? A Course in Miracles asks us. But first we need to understand what within really means. Our greatest resource for changing the world can be our capacity to change our mind about the world. Do we project images, or do we extend inspiration with love? This won't happen overnight, and for sure will take at least a few generations or so to sink in. Our true world leaders will be the ones who take us in this direction, where politics will be a thing of the past and seen as illusion. The awakened mind is one that knows and trusts itself and its source. We must awaken to truth, and you, who now have begun reading this book and listening to me to this point, can start that evolutionary leap along with others by asking yourself one simple question. Can I sense my true essence, or am I losing myself in the world? Thank you, everyone, and we will continue Chapter 10 in the next session.